Hello, IB English 12 students. Welcome to the video context introduction to Kate Chopin's The Awakening. You should have a few windows open. One window for the Google Docs with the contextual information, which I have on the left of the screen. A separate window with the Google Slides presentation, which I have on the right side of the screen. And one window or tab for this video. You can simply play the video in the background while you look at the other two windows. You do not need to watch my video, only have the audio playing in the background. Feel free to pause the audio and make marginal notes in your Google Docs as I go through the contextual information. At 2 points during my presentation, I will ask you to pause the video and respond to the reflection questions in your Google Doc, which you see here. Let's get started. Locate the first subheading in the Google Doc entitled Biographical Information on Kate Chopin and follow along. All right. So all this information is coming from a new biographical approach by Emily Toth. Point A. Kate Chopin was born in St. Louis in 1850 and sent to a boarding school at age 5. I don't want you to get the wrong impression. Because it's a boarding school, it does not mean that it was punitive. It was actually normal for well-to-do families to send their children to these types of schools. B. Her father, Thomas, died in a railroad bridge accident in 1855. He was riding the first train to travel over a newly built Gasconade River Bridge, which collapsed. After the accident, Kate returned home where she lived with her great-grandmother, grandmother, and mother, all of which were widows. The interesting about this is she ends up spending the majority of her life living in an all-female house. There was no male presence. Point C. Kate Chopin's great-great-grandmother ran a profitable shipping business, raised 5 children, and obtained the first legal separation in St. Louis. Her separation shows us 2 things about her. 1, it shows that her great-great-grandmother was not your typical 17th century woman. And 2, separations or divorces were not common. So it shows that her great-great-grandmother was willing to buck the system and take a risk when it came to her reputation. Point D. Kate grew up surrounded by single, independent women, which we've just established in the above 2 bullet points. Point E. In 1870, she married Oscar Chopin, with whom she shared French Catholic ancestry. They shared a friendship of tastes and values. After marriage, Kate was almost constantly pregnant and thus, quote, not to be seen in public. We'll come back to this idea later, but for now, I'd like you to just focus more on her constantly being with child. By age 28, Kate had given birth to 5 children. She and Oscar resided in New Orleans until 1879. Point F. In 1879, Kate and Oscar moved to Cloutierville, Louisiana. This was Kate's first experience living in a small town, and she shocked residents by wearing skirts that revealed her ankles, smoking cigarettes, and buying fancy riding clothes from New Orleans. This is kind of the classic story of the big city girl who moves to a small town, and she's viewed as alien or different by everybody else. In 1882, Oscar dies of swamp fever. Kate is in her early 30s when he passes away. In 1884, Kate returns to St. Louis, where she begins to nurture a writing career. In 1904, Kate participates in the St. Louis World's Fair. The St. Louis World's Fair was a large international exhibition designed to showcase achievements in art, culture, and science from around the globe, so her participation in that fair was important. She then dies on the 22nd of August of a cerebral hemorrhage in that same year. Please locate the reflection section for that first set of text and respond to the question that you see on slide 2. It reads, what does this information tell you about Chopin's perspective on the role of men and women? Highlight and discuss one item from her childhood and one item from her adult life. Please pause the audio here, respond to the reflection, and then resume listening to the audio when you're finished. Okay. Moving on to the next subheading. Subheading 2, excerpts from a period etiquette book. Right, these were the rules that govern the behavior of women, taken from a Norton Critical Edition of The Awakening. So point A, and these are direct quotes from these etiquette books, or books that were designed to tell these women exactly how they were supposed to live their lives. So point A, quote, "On the wife especially devolves the privilege and pleasure of rendering home happy." So this was kind of like the wife's job, and she was to feel privileged to have it. She wasn't supposed to complain about it at all. Next quote, B. This is quote, "The woman's home, whether a palace or a cottage, is the very center of her being, the nucleus around which her affections should revolve, and beyond which she has comparatively small concern. Women need not concern themselves with things going on outside their homes, such as politics. They were literally expected to just focus on what happened inside their house and nothing more. Any other things like politics, etc., going on outside the home were the responsibilities of the men." Point C. Quote, let nothing call you out upon your reception day. Your callers are in a measure invited guests, and it will be an insulting mark of rudeness to be out when they call. Neither can you be excused except in case of sickness. Having appointed the day when you will be at home to see your friends, you must prepare to give your time wholly to them. The usual hours of receptions were from 12 to 3, and you should be dressed at least a half hour beforehand. So first, a note about the callers. They're your callers or guests, but that certainly didn't mean that they were your friends. These were the people who you invited over to your house because the social custom demanded that you do so. That didn't actually mean that you were friends with them or on friendly terms. Speaking of the way women dress, we'll come back to more of this later, but in general, the dresses that these women were expected to wear were not something that they simply slipped on. It was quite an ordeal to put them on. Moving on to the next section, point D. Quote, there is no doubt that a coquettish and flirtatious girl is dangerously periling her chances for a good marriage. No man cares to marry a freelance. So just to clarify, coquettish means flirtatious. They're synonyms. What this is saying, for women, their reputation was everything. So if you had a reputation for flirting with men that you were not married to, you were hurting yourself socially. Point E. Do not accept an invitation to visit any place of amusement with a gentleman unless there is another lady also invited. You may, as a young lady, go with a relative or your fiancé without a chaperone, but not otherwise. This is an interesting rule in the etiquette book. It oddly suggests two things. Either the women are all naturally inclined to be harlots, or the men are all assumed to be sexual predators that can't help themselves when they see a woman. Either way, it's messed up, but this rule is designed to never let someone question your reputation. If there's always somebody there to act as a witness to say what did or did not happen, that was the only way you could protect your reputation if someone were to say something negative about you. If you go to the second slide please look at the pictures on slide 3 of the Google Slides presentation. These are all etchings from a women's etiquette book illustrating the expected and permissible clothing for women. Notice how elaborately these women are dressed and how cumbersome and impractical their bathing suits are. It's important to understand that swimming for women at this time really just meant going into the water a bit and getting wet, not the actual act of swimming laps or partaking in the physically challenging act that we